Are you the reserved guest? I have something to confirm with you, would you mind sparing a moment? As I was about to enter the restaurant, a woman in chef's attire with a tense expression approached me. I wondered what she wanted to confirm regarding my meal. When I listened to her, I was hit with a shocking revelation that made me go pale. My name is Emily Thompson, 31 years old, working in the advertising industry. I work hard to create better advertisements. It's a challenging job but very rewarding. My husband, whom I met through work, is named John, a year older than me, and we've been married for a year. Being a dual-income household, we share our household chores and help each other out, managing our life quite efficiently. Initially, our interactions were only related to work, but as time went by, we started having more personal conversations and grew closer. I realized that we had similar interests and values, and I started developing feelings for him. When our collaborative project was coming to an end, fearing that we might not see each other often afterward, I mustered the courage and confessed my feelings to him. I had always been focused on my work and, while I've dated before, this was the first time I ever confessed my feelings to someone. I was very nervous, but he accepted my feelings. And so, we started dating, and after a year, he proposed, and we got married. Before marriage, John told me he had been previously married and was divorced. They were married for about a year, had no children, and mutually decided to part ways due to differing values. It seemed like John regretted not being able to make his previous marriage work. He seemed a bit reserved when it came to love, probably because of his past experience, but I understood. As long as there were no lingering issues, I didn't mind his past. It wasn't about wanting happiness from marriage, but wanting to live my life alongside John. So, I accepted the fact that John was divorced and went ahead with the wedding. Our married life was filled with happiness, but slowly the real implications of John being divorced began to unravel. After our wedding, we moved to an apartment close to both our workplaces. John's parents live nearby, and we get along well. Our married life has been smoother than I anticipated. I initially had concerns about living so close to my in-laws, fearing potential conflicts, but they were always kind to me. Given our work schedules, John and I hardly have time during the weekdays, but we make the most of our weekends. Living with my husband, due to both of us working, we don't get much leisure time together on weekdays, except for brief conversations at dinner. Therefore, we spend a lot of time together on weekends. We both enjoy eating, and often cook dishes we want to try at home. Ideally, dining out would be great, but I have an allergy to fruits from the Rosaceae family, so I can't casually eat out. Even when I think a dish doesn't contain these fruits, they might be used as a hidden ingredient, making it tedious to constantly check with restaurants. Even a slight touch causes my skin to turn red and swell. I feel bad asking about ingredients at restaurants and have developed an aversion to dining out due to this. I developed this allergy as an adult, and initially, I was taken aback since I hadn't expected it. I recall a time when I ate a lot of strawberries, my mouth swelled up, making it difficult to breathe. I used to eat fruits frequently, and after getting tested at the hospital, I was devastated to find out about my Rosaceae fruit allergy. Discovering that I could no longer eat favorites like strawberries, apples, pears, and peaches saddened me. I've had reactions after eating food I thought was safe, only to find out they contained allergens, which further discouraged me from dining out. This made me apprehensive about buying ready-made meals or snacks, adding a bit of stress to my life. Perhaps due to the initial severe allergic reaction and the sadness of not being able to eat my favorite fruits, I became overly cautious about checking ingredients. During meals with my husband while we were dating, my constant checks made me feel apologetic. However, I can't feel at ease without thorough confirmation, and without it, I can't fully enjoy meals. Still, we love eating, so my husband and I would select ingredients and enjoy cooking together. This routine helped reduce my excessive worries. Fortunately, both my husband and his parents understand my allergies, which has eased the mental burden I felt after getting married. Especially my mother-in-law, who has a deep understanding of allergies. Since her father had a severe wheat allergy. Wheat is commonly used in many products. Even a little bit affected him, and allergies can be lethal, so we were very careful, she explained. She researched my allergy and always ensures that meals are safe for me. When we dine at her place or go out, she takes extra precautions, allowing me to enjoy meals without worries. You shouldn't have to be scared during meals. I'll make sure everything is safe for you, she told me, which almost moved me to tears. I have a great relationship with my in-laws, especially my mother-in-law, who treats me like her own daughter. We often go out together. My husband and his parents are wonderful people, and the concerns I initially had about my allergies have vanished. One day, a project I proposed at work was successful, earning me a promotion, which I excitedly shared with my family. They were all thrilled, especially my mother-in-law. While spending time with her, she invited me to celebrate at an upscale restaurant. That's a very fancy place, isn't it? I can't let you do that, I hesitated. The restaurant was in a luxurious hotel nearby, which I had always dreamt of visiting since my student days. However, it's truly upscale, and I felt it was too extravagant even for a celebration. You don't have to hold back. This is such a joyous occasion, let me treat you, she insisted, genuinely happy about my promotion. Her sentiment warmed my heart, but I had reservations. I remembered visiting the restaurant's website before my allergy developed and dreaming of tasting their fruit-filled tarts someday. The restaurant often uses fruits from the Rosaceae family. While I appreciate my mother-in-law's kindness, besides the issue of the restaurant being upscale, I'm hesitant because they frequently use fruits from the Rosaceae family, which I'm allergic to. Whenever I dined out with my mother-in-law in the past, we informed the restaurant of my allergy beforehand. But each time, I felt guilty asking them to accommodate my dietary restrictions, so we often chose restaurants that seldom use my allergenic foods. I worry that even if we inform this restaurant about my allergy, it might inconvenience them due to their frequent use of fruits. Of course, dishes without these fruits are safe for me, and I'm tempted to try them. However, considering the kitchen likely processes these fruits as well, the risk scares me. In the end, I decided to decline the offer because of my concerns about an allergic reaction. Still, my mother-in-law was keen on the idea. I'll inform them about the allergy when I make the reservation. Don't worry, I also have a connection there, so they'll take good care of us. I was surprised to hear she had a connection to the restaurant since neither she nor my husband had ever mentioned it, but I assumed it wasn't something she boasted about. Given my mother-in-law's enthusiasm and my genuine interest in the restaurant's cuisine, we decided to have lunch there together. Considering that it's a suggestion from my mother-in-law who has always been considerate of my allergies, I felt relieved, thinking there was nothing for me to worry about. When I told my husband about this, he was surprised to hear that his mother had connections at the restaurant. My husband also mentioned that the restaurant sometimes serves fruit, and he appreciated their consideration for allergies. When I told my husband that my mother-in-law had informed the restaurant about my allergies during the reservation and they would take precautions, he seemed relieved. It's a celebration of your promotion, right? Make sure to enjoy yourself. Noticing that I was looking forward to this day, my husband said with a laugh. Initially, I declined because of my allergies, but I had always admired the restaurant, so I was excited about dining there. On the day I had been eagerly waiting for, since it was a weekday, I took a half-day off. After finishing my morning work, I planned to head straight to the restaurant. Being a high-end place, I chose a more formal outfit than usual and paid extra attention to my appearance when going to work. Colleagues noticed my attire and asked about my plans. When I told them about the meal, they wished me a good time before I left the office. Excitedly, I headed to the hotel. As I entered the entrance, my mother-in-law was already there. The two of us headed to the restaurant on the first floor, and since we had a reservation, we were immediately escorted to our table. Our reservation was for 1 p.m., but due to the busy lunchtime, we were informed that the serving might be a bit delayed. It was a popular high-end restaurant, so it was crowded. I understood and decided to order just drinks for the time being and wait patiently. Having already finished work and being encouraged by my mother-in-law, I ordered champagne. We enjoyed our conversation while waiting for our meal. I've had champagne before, but the one I had that day tasted the best. Feeling the effects of the alcohol and the anticipation of dining at a restaurant I had longed for, I was in high spirits. From the dishes at the neighboring tables, I could tell the food looked delicious, and I was eagerly awaiting our meal. Suddenly, my phone rang from inside my bag. Realizing I hadn't turned it off during my meal with my mother-in-law, I tried to shut it off. But seeing the incoming call was from work, I sobered up immediately. Worried that there might be a problem, I excused myself from my mother-in-law and stepped out of the restaurant to take the call, ensuring no one was around in case of sensitive information. The call was regarding a document I had submitted earlier that day. My colleague urgently needed clarification. Relieved that it wasn't because of an error on my part, I answered their questions and wrapped up the call in about 5 minutes. As I was about to turn off my phone to go back and enjoy my meal, an unfamiliar woman approached me. "Excuse me. You're the customer who made a reservation for today's meal at the restaurant, right?" The woman was dressed as a chef, presumably from the restaurant's kitchen. She looked rushed and a bit out of breath, with a concerned expression. I wondered why she would come out during such a busy time. I was puzzled, but when she said she needed to confirm something, I answered her questions. Her face went pale and urgently told me to leave the hotel immediately. "It's dangerous to go back to the restaurant now. Please leave the hotel and ensure your safety immediately." Suspicious of the woman's intense demeanor, I asked for clarification. Once I grasped the situation, I felt the blood drain from my face. I quickly hopped into a taxi waiting in front of the hotel and headed home. That evening, my mother-in-law called. When I picked up, she was furious about me leaving her at the hotel and returning home without saying anything, causing embarrassment since she had reserved a special course. "You had everything set up to celebrate, and you just leave without a word. Don't you know basic manners? What kind of upbringing did you have?" She was angry in a way I had never seen from my mother-in-law before, and she started to berate me. I had always thought of my mother-in-law as a kind and gentle person, but there was no trace of that now. I believed that the kind mother-in-law I had known would be upset if I left without saying anything, but would also be concerned about whether something had happened to me. However, she was furiously yelling with such intensity that I began to believe the rumors about her were true. As I remained silent, she continued to berate me further, complaining even about my parents and how they raised me. "You've been silent this whole time. Don't you realize you've done something wrong? You're not fit to be my son's wife." After a long tirade, she finally seemed to calm down a bit. I then quietly posed a question to her. "You told me that you informed the restaurant about my allergies when you made the reservation today, and I could relax, right? But the restaurant wasn't aware of my allergies, so what happened?" In fact, the meal today had ingredients that I was allergic to. Not only in the dessert but also in the main courses, the allergenic ingredients were used in marinades and sauces, which weren't apparent from just looking. The woman who approached me earlier had taken the reservation call from my mother-in-law, and she said that no mention of my allergies had been made then. However, she noticed the allergy badge on my bag and came to check just in case. Being the chef responsible for our meal that day, she immediately noticed the inclusion of the allergenic ingredients. If she hadn't informed me, I would have unknowingly consumed the food with allergens, which would have resulted in a severe allergic reaction. Initially, I doubted that my mother-in-law would purposely make me consume allergens, but considering the woman took time out of her busy schedule to inform me, I quickly believed her. Furthermore, this woman knew about my mother-in-law's true nature. Thus, she deduced my situation and advised me to leave immediately and ensure I went somewhere my mother-in-law wouldn't follow. The reason she knew my mother-in-law was that she was my husband's ex-wife. She now works under her maiden name, Kate Young. Seeing me with my mother-in-law, she realized I was the new wife and decided to help me out. She assumed I was the new wife because she believed that my mother-in-law wouldn't have female friends, especially someone of a similar age. After getting married to my husband, the ex-wife lived with his parents and was subjected to significant mistreatment by my mother-in-law. Before they married, she, like me, thought the mother-in-law was gentle and kind, which left her quite baffled. Once they started living together, when my husband or father-in-law wasn't around, the ex-wife faced continuous criticism for her housework and was always subjected to snide remarks. Being a full-time housewife, she had no escape. Despite her culinary skills, honed from attending a professional cooking school, the mother-in-law still found faults with her dishes, even discarding them at times. She considered discussing this with her husband, but the mother-in-law was adept at concealing her true nature, especially around him. Feeling her complaints would fall on deaf ears, the ex-wife aimed to gather evidence. But as she had recently become a full-time housewife, she lacked funds and was almost constantly under the watchful eye of the mother-in-law. Unable to gather proof and without anyone to confide in, she felt trapped in this life. So, she fled in the form of a divorce. Despite never having worked before, she utilized her culinary license to seek employment and was lucky to land a job at the restaurant. She worked diligently, and over time, the memories of her mistreatment faded, and she began to enjoy her work. After a few years, as she matured into a full-fledged chef, for some reason, my mother-in-law discovered she worked there and started frequenting the restaurant. Upon realizing her ex-daughter-in-law was there, she discreetly threatened her for discounts. While she declined absurd demands, past traumas influenced her to yield to some. The connection my mother-in-law spoke of referred to the ex-wife. When I questioned why she hadn't communicated my allergies to the restaurant, my mother-in-law feigned ignorance. "I knew about your allergies, so I must have told them. Maybe it's the staff's oversight?" She countered defensively, placing the blame on the restaurant staff. Given that the reservation call was handled by the ex-wife, it's probable that my mother-in-law deliberately didn't mention the allergies, intending to pin the blame on the restaurant. However, I was already onto her game. Considering the restaurant's stringent guidelines on allergies, if informed, they'd have accommodated my dietary needs. Moreover, they record calls for dispute resolutions, so it would be easy to verify who was at fault. When confronted with this, my mother-in-law, not anticipating recorded evidence, fell silent. I pressed on. "You've always been cautious about my allergies. Why did you not mention them this time?" Until now, my mother-in-law was well aware of the dangers of allergies and always showed concern, so I never imagined she'd do something like this. She knew that by doing this, it wouldn't end well for me. Given that we had a good relationship until now, I was curious why she acted this way and sought an explanation. I was shocked by her behavior, but more than that, I was baffled why she would act in such a manner. After a brief silence, she shouted defiantly, "I despise you! You outshine me! You deserve some pain!" She was envious since I received praise at work and was more liked in the neighborhood than her. She arrogantly claimed that even if I spoke out, no one would believe me. If it weren't for this incident, I wouldn't have believed she was capable of such actions. Thus, I had collected evidence to reveal her true nature and confronted her with it. "Everyone will believe me. My parents and my husband, John, are here listening to everything. Plus, this conversation is being recorded." Everyone present had heard her berate me and her intentions to purposely expose me to allergens. In fact, after leaving the restaurant, I immediately went to my parents' house and had John join us. I had informed them of the situation, and we were discussing our next steps when she called. So, I swiftly switched the call to speaker and started recording it for evidence. As a result, we had her incriminating statements on tape. She was taken aback by my revelation and asked in a shaky voice, "Wait, is John there with you?" She never expected her son to find out and asked in a trembling voice. In response, her son, who had been silent and emotionless gathering evidence, spoke up. "I heard everything. I can't believe you'd do something like this, Mom," he said in a suppressed, angry tone, and she hastily began making excuses. "It wasn't like that, I didn't mean." Her desperate attempt seemed insincere, especially after her earlier outburst. His anger was evident as he shouted, Not only towards Kate but also towards Emily. I don't even want to think of you as my mother anymore. We're cutting ties. Given the true nature of the mother he had trusted, John was beyond furious. He then declared his estrangement from her, ignoring her cries. Furthermore, my parents said that they would sue her for attempted murder, and John cut off the call, disregarding her voice. Later, when John informed his father about the incident, he was furious and suggested divorce, eventually throwing her out of the house. With no relatives to rely on, no income, and being a housewife, she clung desperately, pleading and crying. Her husband, feeling a final bit of pity, put her in a basic apartment. He paid the first month's rent and told her to find work so she could support herself. But, having been a housewife, she seemed to lack the drive to work, and for some reason, clung to both John and me. She barged into our house demanding money, but we drove her away, telling her to earn it herself. Especially John, who was extremely stern, ensuring she wouldn't approach our house again. Later on, rumors suggested she started working at a nearby supermarket, but she seemed quite disheveled. Given her nasty attitude, she had no one to rely on and seemed to be struggling on her own. I hope she continues to work hard both for her own expenses and to pay us the compensation, and I want her to stay out of our lives. As for why she did what she did, it seems she was jealous of me and wanted to see me suffer. John's ex-wife had moved in after graduating from a vocational school and became a housewife. She was submissive, obeyed her mother-in-law, and had a quiet nature. Due to her unpleasant character, which made her disliked by women, and her enjoyment in bullying those weaker than herself, she used to take out her stress on John's ex-wife. However, I am independent, working, and getting promotions. I had a higher social status than her and was well regarded in our neighborhood. Initially, she liked me thinking I was a competent daughter-in-law, but she gradually grew jealous. Being unable to bully me, she wished I'd be in a position where I'd become incompetent, wanting to look down on me. After the explosive call, when John and his father confronted her, she confessed everything, leading to their declaration of cutting ties with her. Later, John apologized to his ex-wife for not noticing the bullying. At that time, he was new at his job and deeply trusted his mother, which blinded him to her behavior. Still, he felt he should have noticed and was regretful. His ex-wife assured him she was over it. She's dating someone now, and their conversation ended on a peaceful note. John felt relieved knowing she was genuinely happy. Thanks to her help, I became friends with John's ex-wife. She's also career-oriented, and we get along well. Although she's his ex-wife, there's nothing concerning regarding their relationship, and I'm glad to have a friend close in age. After settling matters with the mother-in-law, John and his father threw me a promotion party. With the celebration from the two of them, I felt happy and determined to continue working hard without worrying about my mother-in-law. The baby's crying was so loud that I changed the locks. Well, what am I supposed to do then? When I asked Michael, for some reason, I heard my in-laws' voices in response. Both you and the kid can sleep on the streets. Following those unbelievable words, I could also hear my in-laws laughing. So, they're in on it too, huh? Realizing that, I said with a sigh. All right, wherever I sleep, don't complain. Huh? Both my in-laws and Michael were dumbfounded. They probably thought I had nowhere to go. But tough luck for them. I never thought I'd be locked out, but I do have a place to go. And that place happens to be inconvenient for them. Well, they can regret it after I'm gone. I don't care what they say later. Right now, all that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down in flames. With that resolve, I turned my back on my in-laws' house. My name is Susan. Next month, I'll be celebrating my 30th birthday. I'm a stay-at-home mom, but right now, I'm not doing any housework. Of course, I'm not just slacking off. You see, Barbara was born just 2 weeks ago, so I'm currently resting. That's why I'm not doing any chores. However, Michael doesn't seem to care. Why aren't you doing any housework? Just want to slack off? Even my father-in-law, who was with his wife during childbirth, seems clueless. People usually get back to housework the next day. It's astonishing that he'd say something like that. Doesn't anyone understand me? Things aren't going well with my husband, and there's a distance between me and my in-laws. I don't have my parents anymore, and I have no family to rely on. But even if I'm all alone, I must protect Barbara at all costs. That thought kept me going. Maybe getting married was a mistake. I've been thinking that a lot lately. But until we got married, both Michael and my in-laws were kind. Especially my in-laws, they even offered to cover the wedding costs, which shows how considerate they were towards me. Can we really accept the money for the wedding? It's our only son's wedding, Susan. We can't be stingy, or we'll be the laughingstock of our family. Saying this, my mother-in-law chuckled. My father-in-law felt the same at that time. Both Michael and I work in the bridal industry. Some of our company colleagues will be attending, so we can't have a wedding that's embarrassing. Michael and my father-in-law work at the same bridal company. It's pretty well known in our local area, say, kinda like a recognized company in Nebraska. Moreover, they have a broad range of businesses. Their primary focus is on wedding venues, but they seem to also manage restaurants for wedding after-party and such. So, most of the attendees were deeply familiar with weddings. Guess that means we couldn't have a cheap-looking wedding. Now I understand why they offered to cover the expenses. So, with the help of my in-laws, Michael and I had a rather lavish wedding. But the good times ended there. Once we got married and I began living in their home, they started to make demands. Hey, Susan? You're not expecting yet? Well. I gave a vague response. My mother-in-law let out an exaggerated sigh. Oh boy, you're not too helpful, are ya? Excuse me? Not helpful? I quickly retorted. But she just looked away. It's nothing. She brushed it off in an obvious manner. I was like, wait, is this what they call the cold shoulder? The thought briefly crossed my mind. But I have still felt indebted because of the wedding expenses. In the end, I couldn't muster the courage to confront her directly. On the other hand, my father-in-law treats me like I'm some sort of maid. Hey, where are the snacks? Sorry, I'll get them right now. You should have had it ready before I got back. Some wife you are. He started to grumble. I was taken aback. Some wife. What's that supposed to mean? Do I also need to look after him? I married Michael and became his wife. So I'm committed to him. Of course, I want to do my best for my in-laws too. But being ordered around feels a bit different. I wonder if this is how they truly feel about me. I was baffled by the sudden change in my in-laws' attitude. However, I didn't have the guts to stand up to them. I thought if I did, they'd kick me out. I quit my job when we got married. I don't have much savings left. Moreover, I don't have my parents. Meaning, if we were to divorce, I'd have no one to turn to. Out of fear, I couldn't defy my in-laws. Even when my mother-in-law picked on me, or when my father-in-law treated me like a maid, I had no choice but to endure. I've suppressed my feelings deep inside. Then, about 6 months after our marriage, one day, I felt sick as I was about to prepare breakfast and collapsed on the spot. What? What's wrong? My mother-in-law asked, sounding annoyed. I just feel a bit dizzy. You're so clumsy. I'm sorry, just a moment. Saying that, I rushed to the bathroom. But my condition didn't improve. Hey! What the heck are you doing, Susan? Leaving your chores and doing what? Sorry. That's not good enough. I'm off to work, so make sure you finish the housework. Got it? Michael shouted. I felt too sick to even respond. A few hours passed, and I finally felt better. But my mother-in-law was waiting for me in the living room. Found a good excuse to slack off, huh? I didn't mean to slack off. Don't talk back to me. Just clean and do the laundry. I flinched at her loud voice. She kept glaring at me, unaware of how I felt. Guess I just gotta do it. With a sigh, I started the chores. I managed to get through that day. But my health didn't fully recover. Feeling something was off, a few days later, I went to the doctor. Turns out, I was pregnant. I hurried home to report to my mother-in-law first. To my surprise, she suddenly changed her attitude. "Oh. You were pregnant? Why didn't you say so sooner?" She grinned at me. And then, she quickly started making a call. "It's been a while. You know, my son's wife is pregnant." Judging from the conversation, it seemed she was bragging to a relative. Maybe she'll be a bit kinder to me now. That was the hope I clung to. But I was wrong. Even after learning about my pregnancy, my in-laws treated me the same. Even worse, I overheard my father-in-law saying something. "Once the heir is born, we don't need her. We could even let her go." He was happily chatting on the phone with an acquaintance. I was utterly taken aback. All they really wanted was an heir. I kind of knew it from the way they treated me. But hearing it out loud made it all the more painful. I bit my lip and continued with the housework. Of course, I thought about discussing this with Michael. But right after finding out about my pregnancy, Michael started coming home late. When I asked him why, Michael replied with a sharp tone. "You're pregnant, so I've done my part as a husband, haven't I?" "What do you mean?" "If a wife doesn't get pregnant, folks talk, right? I just did my part to help with that." And so, Michael just rambled on with his selfish reasoning. "What the heck, Michael? Stop joking around. Enough. All you need to do is give birth. That's your duty as a wife." Michael looked at me as if he married me out of obligation. At that moment, everything became clear. Michael wasn't going to support me. In fact, he wasn't even on my side. I was all alone here. Besides, my in-laws were never kind to me. They were just kind to ensure their heir and to have someone do the housework. Realizing that, my spirit broke. All my love and feelings for Michael vanished. Oh, yes. I'm gonna divorce him once the baby is born. From that day on, that's what I started thinking. In that case, I need to be prepared for the divorce. In the short time before giving birth, I hired someone to investigate Michael and my in-laws. And soon, the day came for me to give birth. A beautiful baby girl was born. I named her as Barbara. The day we brought Barbara home, both my in-laws and Michael were thrilled. However, their expressions gradually darkened. And then, tragedy struck. It was on the day of Barbara's 1-month checkup. After the checkup, I was given a ride by Mr. Smith, the CEO of Michael's company. Apparently, Mr. Smith's daughter had given birth around the same time I had. So, we ended up having our checkups together, and I got a ride due to Mr. Smith's kindness. But there was a problem when we got to my house. For some reason, the front door key wouldn't work. I knocked at the door and called out. "Hey, Michael? I can't open the door." From inside, I heard Michael's voice. "The baby kept crying at night, so I changed the lock." "You changed the front door lock without telling me?" When I asked him that, Michael raised his voice. "She cries all day. I want to enjoy some quiet time, so don't come back." "So, what am I supposed to do?" When I asked Michael, surprisingly, I heard my in-laws respond. "You and the kid can sleep on the streets." Following that unbelievable statement, I could hear my in-laws laughing. "So, they're in on this too, huh?" Realizing that, I responded sarcastically. "Fine, don't complain wherever I end up sleeping." "Huh?" Both my in-laws and Michael sounded shocked. They probably thought I had nowhere to go. But joke's on them. I didn't expect to be locked out, but I have somewhere to go. And that place will be inconvenient for all of you. They'll regret it later. And I won't care about what they say then. Right now, the only thing that matters to me is Barbara. If I can protect her, I don't care if you all go down. I made up my mind and turned my back on my in-laws. I then approached Mr. Smith. You heard everything, right? Of course, I did. So, about what we discussed earlier, could you help me? I asked Mr. Smith. By the way, that conversation was about something Mr. Smith had mentioned during the ride. Actually, there are several postnatal care hotels. Mr. Smith's company, which is into the bridal business, was also considering incorporating this postnatal care. From marriage to childbirth, to raising kids. I really want to have a long-term relationship with our customers. That's what Mr. Smith had been saying. And he'd approached me, asking if I wanted to be a consumer monitor their plan. I posed a question and Mr. Smith nodded in agreement. Let me guide you through it. Thank you. That being said, I can't stand that attitude. Mr. Smith looked sternly at Michael's in-laws. Probably contemplating some form of retribution for Michael and the other two. Well, as a company CEO, it's hard to ignore such things. Especially if the company is venturing into the children's business. With that thought, I made a proposal to Mr. Smith. Upon hearing the plan I'd thought of even before giving birth, Mr. Smith nodded deeply. Let's collaborate on that proposal. Thank you. That's how I gained a powerful ally. However, I was dead tired. So, they had me transported straight to a postnatal care facility, kind of like a luxury facility. Thanks to Mr. Smith's influence, I got to stay in a premium suite. The postnatal care plan experience was top-notch. The facility had specialized staff like midwives available 24/7. The support was comprehensive, and many amenities were provided for relaxation. There were other new moms around, and for the first time in a while, I could really take it easy. I wish I could stay here forever. That feeling just came out of my mouth. I could really rest. And then, the next day, Mr. Smith came to visit me. In front of me, he called Michael. Soon, Michael answered. Ah, is that you, Michael? Sorry to disturb you during your break. No worries. What can I do for you? Well, actually, I have a favor to ask. After a brief pause, Mr. Smith continued. I'd like you guys to be models for our brochure. Can you do it? You mean my wife, daughter, and I? Look, your daughter was just born, right? She'd be perfect for the brochure. True, for a bridal-related brochure, they'd be the ideal choice. But Michael had just kicked me out. There's no way he'd agree under these circumstances, right? I couldn't help but smirk. If Michael refused a direct request from the president himself, there's no way it wouldn't impact his career advancement. That was my plan, to damage Michael. But Michael immediately accepted without hesitation. Sure thing. I got this. I was flustered. Now, I can't damage Michael. My plan was a total bust. Just when I thought that, Mr. Smith smirked. Then, Mr. Smith said to Michael, Can you come to the studio right away? How about in an hour? Wait, in an hour? Yeah, I'll get the crew ready, so. As Mr. Smith was speaking, Michael interrupted in a panic. Hold on a sec. Today's a bit. What's the matter? Well, I have to discuss with my wife. Michael began to fumble for words. Seems he thought he could convince me if he had more time. That's what you get for agreeing without thinking. Serves him right. I couldn't help but grin. Why don't you talk to her now? Your daughter was just born. She's right there with you, isn't she? Mr. Smith added salt to the wound. Michael was completely silent. In the end, Michael said he'd consult and hung up the phone. Needless to say, I was bombarded with calls right after. Of course, I ignored them all. For about 30 minutes, my cell phone was ringing off the hook. But it seems he finally gave up and my phone went silent. Immediately after, Mr. Smith's phone rang. Well, my wife says she's embarrassed. I never said any such thing. As I thought that, Mr. Smith let out a very audible sigh. Really, can't even persuade your own wife? No, it's not like that. I'm really disappointed in you. As soon as Mr. Smith said that, a loud apology started, loud enough for me to hear. I'm so sorry. I promise I'll persuade her. The voice of his apology sounded like Michael was making desperate efforts to convince me in front. After letting Michael apologize for a while, Mr. Smith ended the call. Then, he dialed up my father-in-law. Hello? Hello. Mr. Smith. What can I do for you? Actually, I have a gift for you. Would you accept it? Saying so, Mr. Smith looked at me. I smiled and nodded. Do you know that we run a restaurant for parties? Of course. I'm thinking of lending it to you. Wait, lend it out? My father-in-law must have been puzzled. The truth is, this was all part of my plan. First, Mr. Smith would personally offer the spacious restaurant for Michael's father. And then, have a party for the grandchild there. Once the 1-month checkup is done, it's about time for the baby to go out for walks. That's the time for a party to show our baby around then. Any regular family might jump at this offer with joy. But our situation is different. Michael just kicked me out, so there's no way I'd accept his invitation. So, my father-in-law began to panic and make excuses. No, it's just, What? Are you gonna decline my gift? No, I'd never. It's just that we have to consider Susan and the baby's health. My father-in-law started making up reasons. I was irritated. Then, Mr. Smith interjected. Was there a problem at the 1-month checkup? No, it's not like that, but... Then, have a party there. Don't worry about the costs, I'll cover it. As for the date. Mr. Smith kept moving the conversation forward. All the while, I could hear my father-in-law's flustered voice. He's panicking, wonder what he's gonna do. I was holding back my laughter. Eventually, Mr. Smith finished talking and abruptly hung up. Right then, my phone started ringing. It's from my father-in-law. Grinning, I held my phone. Well, what should I do? No need to even ask about my father-in-law's business. So, I could just ignore it. But ignoring isn't fun. And I'd be left feeling frustrated. So, I picked up. Hello. Susan? His voice was louder than usual. He must be really panicked. Either way, I responded with an annoyed tone. Oh, is that you? Thank God. Susan, please listen to me. Huh? No thanks. I replied sharply. My father-in-law looked stunned for a moment, but quickly gathered himself, pleading with me. Don't say that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime request, please. At that point, I felt like I had the upper hand. Trying to hide my amusement, I asked. What's going on? Well, I have a favor to ask. He began to relay what Mr. Smith had told him. However, it all seemed too convenient to me. He didn't mention any instructions from Mr. Smith, nor did he specify a date and time. He just kept going on about wanting to have a party and how he'd rent out a place. So, I bluntly refused. I decline. After all, I was kicked out. No, that's not it. The thing is, my father-in-law started to rattle off excuses. Losing my patience, I raised my voice. If you send me a video you apologize to me, I'll consider attending that party. Well, he was at a loss for words. Send me that video. If it checks out, I'll go. Bye. With that, I hung up the phone. He surely wouldn't take himself go as far as apologizing to me. I was too confident about that. However, contrary to what I thought, a video of my father-in-law begging was sent to my cell phone. This threw a wrench into my plans. I was gonna make the party a flop and have him apologize to Mr. Smith. I'd have to come up with something else. Seeing my troubled face, Mr. Smith, sitting next to me, offered some advice. How about this for the debut party? I listened intently. It was indeed an intriguing idea. Moreover, I could get one over on both Michael and my in-laws. I'll go with that. I immediately started getting ready. A few days went by, and the day of the party Mr. Smith had set came around. Of course, I hadn't been back to my in-laws' place. In fact, I hadn't even been in touch with Michael or my in-laws. A little suspense never hurt anyone, right? Thinking that, I headed to the venue with Mr. Smith. Peeking into the venue, I could see my in-laws being grilled by relatives. What's going on? Why aren't they here? Something's not right. Well. My father-in-law was sweating bullets. Some other relatives were confronting Michael. You didn't leave the house with your wife? No, I mean, there's no way we could leave together. After all, we weren't living together. Still, I felt bad for keeping everyone waiting. Slowly, Mr. Smith and I entered the venue. Thank you for waiting. Finally. My father-in-law breathed a sigh of relief. Michael, on the other hand, rushed up to me. What have you been up to, Susan? Excuse me? Preparing for this event, duh? Preparations, but where's Barbara? Michael quickly looked around in a panic. Even though he had been neglecting her all this time, I replied with a sigh. I've left Barbara with a babysitter today. What? Then, what about the party? I've prepared a slideshow. That's enough, isn't it? Saying that, I brushed past Michael. Then, I began explaining to the gathered relatives. I couldn't bring Barbara here, but I've prepared a slideshow for you all. While I spoke, a staff member began setting up the slideshow. Checking that, I continued my speech. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, but please enjoy this. With my signal, soft music began to play. The venue dimmed. At the same time, several photos were projected onto the screen. Immediately, gasps echoed throughout the room. What's this? Displayed on the screen were photos of Michael's affair, followed by photos of my father-in-law's affair. You've gotta be kidding me. You're the worst. Naturally, seeing the photo, Michael and his father went pale. But quickly, Michael dashed to stop the slideshow. Stop it. Turn it off. Really? You brought this on yourself, didn't you? This is your doing. Why would you do such a thing? Michael shouted at me. So, I shot back. It's because you locked Barbara and me out. You changed the front door locks while we weren't home. The room went silent. Then, murmurs began. Locked out? What's going on? Amidst the whispers, I exposed the conversation from when our house keys were changed. I also mentioned that Mr. Smith was there. That's a lie, right? Sorry, but it's true. Mr. Smith witnessed it and helped me out. As I said that, Mr. Smith nodded. It's over. This is the end for me. Michael crumbled. Looking back, his father was in total shock. Going forward, our company's gonna expand into children's business. So, we don't need employees who can't care for children. It wasn't my fault. I was just sleep deprived. No excuses. Resign on your own. If not, I'm ready to fire you even if it causes a scene. The determination of the president was intense. In the end, Michael and his father resigned immediately. After that, I proposed a divorce to Michael. Having those revealing photos of his affair made our divorce process smooth. Additionally, Michael settled by paying me child support for Barbara. He just got cash out his leave, so he wouldn't struggle for money right now. Interestingly, his mistress claimed she didn't know Michael was already married. She's now seeking compensation from Michael. Looks like they're gonna have quite a dispute, but it's none of my business. By the way, my in-laws seem to be sticking together. They actually want to divorce, but all their savings went to Michael's legal fees. To support their immediate living expenses, they're selling their family home and moving into an apartment. Considering they also have to pay child support, they'll need to tighten their belts and live frugally. On my end, I was approached by Mr. Smith regarding job offer. He was like, "We've got someone leaving soon. How about working for us? Barbara's still young, but I need to work to make ends meet. So, I'm thinking I'll take up Mr. Smith's job offer in a little while. For now, I just want to quietly spend precious moments with Barbara. After all the hardships I've faced, I think I deserve that little luxury." Did the stuff for Jane and Hannah arrive? From today, we're gonna be supporting them, my husband, Bob, declared triumphantly over the phone. I was at a loss for words due to Bob's sudden declaration. It seemed like Bob only had Jane and Hannah on his mind. There was not a shred of consideration for me. I might as well discard such a husband. "Yep, the stuff arrived, and I just moved into a new place," I responded in a deliberately cheerful tone. "Huh? A new place?" Bob muttered and then was stunned. "My name is Caroline Smith. I just turned 50 this year. I work in sales at a major company. Although there are constant complaints and troubles from clients, the job is rewarding and enjoyable. I have many clients who have been good to me since back in the day. Working hard on weekdays means I tend to chill at home on weekends. My only family is my husband, Bob. We don't have children. My parents passed away quite a while ago. My parents-in-law live nearby, but we're not that close. We have a casual relationship. Bob loves dining out, often taking his sister Jane along for many of his outings. Jane's daughter, Hannah, always joins them. In the early stages of our marriage, I did complain to Bob, because he always prioritized Jane and her daughter over me. However, those feelings gradually faded. Why? I want to repay them for the struggles I caused during my student days. After learning of Bob's sincere feelings, I understood. In reality, my in-laws are impoverished. They live in a small, run-down apartment. It's incredibly cramped. Ever since my father-in-law failed in his business ventures, they've lived this way. Still, amidst it all, Bob diligently pursued his studies. However, he didn't pass his first-choice state university. It seems he only got accepted into private universities. Naturally, he was told by his parents that they couldn't afford to pay for it. That's when Jane, who was working at the time, helped out a bit with his tuition. With the aid of scholarships, Bob somehow managed to graduate from college. That's why Bob seems to be grateful to Jane, who supported him during difficult times. And then, after Jane got married, she quit her job. Her husband wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom, it seems. Therefore, the amount of money Jane herself can use is limited. After hearing this story, I stopped complaining. I can understand the reasons for wanting to give back. I thought it best to let Bob do as he pleases. Although there's a bit of loneliness, it can't be helped. Well, I'm gonna go out to eat with Jane and Hannah now. Bob is going to dine out with Jane and her daughter today, as well. Have a good time. With a smile, I saw Bob off. Let's continue to live, supporting each other, with Bob, who values family, in the future. That's what I thought. The rift in our relationship happened about 3 months ago. One day, Bob approached with a serious expression, saying, "In fact, Jane's getting a divorce. She seems to have decided to keep custody of Hannah." When I heard Jane was divorcing, I was honestly very perplexed. Because, to me, Jane was a type of person I found difficult to deal with. This goes back to when I visited Bob's parents' house to introduce myself before we got married. Jane happened to be visiting Bob's family home at the time. "Bob, you're marrying her? She's so plain and has bad taste." Jane laughed uproariously at me as soon as she saw my face. Bob and his parents didn't say a word. Everyone just acted like they didn't notice. So, I had no choice but to tolerate Jane's rude behavior. As I recalled that, Bob continued, "I'm gonna visit home every day for a while. Unlike you, who's thick-skinned, Jane is delicate. And I'm worried about Hannah too." Bob disparaged me with a calm demeanor. However, I did not retort. Arguing with Bob here, and then having him perpetually visit his parents' house, would also be a problem. Take care. I couldn't say anything else and just saw Bob off. From then on, Bob spent more time away from home. Until now, he often came home around 8 p.m. on weekdays. But now, there are times when he doesn't return even by the next morning. He's almost never home on weekends. My loneliness just grew. I'm home. When I returned from work and called out, there was no response at all. The room was pitch dark. Must be at his parents' house again. With Bob's absence, I often found myself downhearted. However, when Bob was home, he began to annoy me more and more. That day, Bob was uncharacteristically at home, but he made an unthinkable request of me. Jane told me, "You haven't given a housewarming gift yet? You're so stingy. You're getting a bonus soon, right? Buy her a designer bag or something." Bob said this as if I must to do so. A housewarming gift. Why do I have to give one? Why don't you do it, Bob? I responded in kind, but Bob instantly got angry. You married into this family, so Jane's your family too, isn't she? Don't you think it's ill-mannered not to even be able to do a simple thing like giving a gift to family? Bob said, berating me. The lecture from Bob went on for about an hour after that. In the end, he only said, anyway. Just make sure to give Jane and Hannah a gift before leaving the house. He's likely gone to his parents' house. I've never received anything from Jane. I murmured quietly. A few days later, I got a call from Jane. Hello? You heard from Bob, didn't you? You really don't think things through. Normally, you'd give a housewarming gift. Jane stated as if she deserves it. I got irritated at the selfish attitude. So, I retaliated. You've never done anything for us either, have you? Even at our wedding, we didn't get a gift from you. During the wedding, Jane said with a smile, we're family, so we don't need a wedding gift, right? And handed over an empty gift envelope. But there's nothing inside, is there? Even when I asked, Jane put on an innocent face. I did buy the envelope, right? I'm so nice, aren't I? Jane said with full confidence. I was at a loss for words at Jane's utter lack of common sense. And Jane had absolutely no restraint. She heartily ate the wedding meal and drank several drinks outside of the course. Even when I handed Jane the catalog gift for the guests, she complained, aren't there any no-shows? If there were, I could take home several. Caroline, you really don't think things through. That was the outcome, with her complaining like that. Remembering all that, Jane replied with a scoff. You're my brother's wife. I don't need to give you anything, do I? You're the lowest in our family hierarchy. Rather, it's only natural for you to honor me. If you understand, go buy a new designer bag quickly. I was astounded at the way Jane spoke. Unable to say anything, Hannah strikes up a conversation. Caroline, make sure you buy my bag too. It has to be the one exclusive to the Fifth Avenue store, or I won't forgive you. Bye. Hannah, laughing loudly with a ha-ha-ha, hung up just like that. Unbelievable. Why am I the only one who has to put up with this? I heaved a big sigh. After that, Bob just stopped coming home. Whenever he did come back, he would take money from my wallet. Stop it! Despite my desperate attempts to stop him, Bob couldn't care less. You're always at home, so you're not gonna use the money, right? I'll use it for something worthwhile. Be grateful. Waving a few bills, Bob left the house. I can't take this anymore. I was becoming worn out from Bob's selfish actions. Then, one day, the doorbell rang, and I opened the front door. Hello? Then, someone who appeared to be a mover said, Is this the residence of Mr. Bob Smith? We'll start moving the stuff in right away, and began bringing a multitude of boxes into the house. I hurriedly tried to stop him. I told him, wait a minute. We didn't order this. However, the mover responded with a slightly troubled look. "It's Mr. Bob Smith's residence, right? We received a request directly from him." I was perplexed by the mover's reply. What on earth is all this cardboard boxes? Feeling an inexplicable anxiety, I immediately called Bob. "What is it?" Fortunately, Bob answered right away. In the background of the call, I could hear the crude laughter of what seemed to be Jane and Hannah. I immediately confronted Bob. "There are movers here bringing box after box into our house. What's going on?" Then, Bob said something completely unexpected. "Oh, did the stuff for Jane and Hannah arrive? From today, we're gonna be supporting them. I don't need your opinion, got it?" Bob declared triumphantly over the phone. In the background of the call, Jane started to speak. "Welcome aboard. Since you don't have kids, you must be thrilled to take care of our Hannah, right? Be grateful. What? This old lady is gonna be like a parent? So embarrassing, I can't tell my friends." Hannah voiced her displeasure with a tinge of offense. I was at a loss for words due to Bob's sudden declaration. Surely, the in-laws' house must have become too cramped, prompting Jane to plead with him. "Our house is bigger and has spare rooms." No doubt, they were requested by Jane and Hannah, who knew about this. It seemed like Bob only had Jane and Hannah on his mind. There was not a shred of consideration for me. I might as well discard such a husband. I made up my mind. As I remained silent, Bob continued to issue orders. "Additional baggage will arrive in a week. I bought new furniture for Jane and Hannah online. So, make sure to get things sorted out. We'll stay at our parents' place until then. We can't live in a room scattered with boxes." Bob said so with a laugh. "Hey, isn't this too pitiful for Caroline? She has to sort out our stuff all by herself." Jane was also snickering. "It's our precious belongings. Handle them with care." Hannah had the audacity to demand. "I want to hang up this call so badly." "So, all right." I simply said that and immediately hung up the phone. Right after hanging up the phone. "All right, let's get to it." I swiftly sprang into action. A week later. Bob called again. "Did the additional baggage arrive? Did you tidy up the room properly?" Bob probably wants to know the current state of the house. He seemed somewhat anxious, unable to calm down. So, I smiled sweetly. "Yep, the stuff arrived, and I just moved into a new place." I responded in a deliberately cheerful tone. "Huh? A new place?" Bob muttered and then was stunned. In fact, on the day Jane and Hannah's belongings first arrived, I promptly sprung into action. I immediately headed to a local real estate agent and directly negotiated, "Find me a place to live, now." Initially, they declined, saying it was impossible. Most places require renovations before moving in, or have handover procedures, which means you can't move in on the same day. But after checking with several agents, I was introduced to a place. It was a women-only shared housing. It came with automatic locks, providing a safe environment for women to live in. The bathroom, toilet, and kitchen are shared, and electricity and gas are already set up. Therefore, they could be used from the first day of moving in. A cleaning service comes regularly, so it seems like a well-thought-out housing. And because it furnished, minimal luggage would not be a problem. According to the real estate agent, there was just one room available. "I'd like to see the room right away," I immediately requested of the agent. They took me to view it straight away. And just by taking one look inside the room, I decided, I'll take it. When I shared this story, Bob was visibly shaken, even over the phone. "Moving out on your own is utterly unreasonable, isn't it? We're a married couple. Apologize to me right now and come home." Bob scolded me. Jane, perhaps shaken, hysterically asked, "What's happening with our room?" Hannah too yelled angrily, "Don't mess with us, old hag." When I didn't rebuttal, Bob said as if he thought of something clever, "Do you think it's okay to do such a selfish thing? If we get divorced, you'll be the one in trouble, you know? That's right. With your age and looks, you won't find another suitor in the future, right? You're just a plain old lady. Your future's looking pretty bleak, how pitiful. Serves you right, Jane said, sounding rather pleased. In the background over the phone, Hannah was laughing and saying, "The old lady's done for." At that moment, Bob said, sounding smug, "If you apologize to us sincerely from now on, I'll forgive you. Unlike you, we're kind, after all." He snorted through his nose, laughing. In the background of the call, Jane and Hannah were shouting in agreement. So I gave them a piece of my mind. Actually, Bob should be the one apologizing, don't you think? I know about the affair you're having. What? Bob was visibly shaken. The truth is, Bob has been cheating for over 3 months now. The other woman is a colleague from his workplace. How did you find out? I thought I'd been utterly discreet, Bob asked, his voice trembling with fear. He must have been so sure he wouldn't get caught. So, it wasn't surprising he reacted that way. Being the kind-hearted person that I am, I decided to tell him. I hired a private investigator just in case. Because you've hardly been home, right? I thought maybe you were cheating. Good thing I trusted my instincts. And since Bob stayed silent, I just kept on going. I was shocked when the PI got back to me. They finished the investigation in 3 days. You were seeing her every day, huh? Those meals out with Jane and Hannah were only on your days off, it seems. They said they got plenty of pictures too, I said, laughing. According to the PI's findings, Bob had been gallivanting around with his mistress every day after work. The money he'd likely been taking from my wallet must have been for her. Bob and his mistress were often close together, making it easy for the PI to get good pictures. I'm gonna divorce you, Bob, and I'll be demanding alimony. And of course, from your colleague, the mistress, as well. Expect a certified letter at your office, I said, smirking to Bob. After receiving the PI's results, I headed straight to a law firm. Having conclusive evidence, even the lawyers seemed rather taken aback. How dare you? Bob spat out, clearly irate. When the certified letter arrives at the company, even without opening it, they'll probably have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And it's not just going to Bob, but to his mistress at the same company. Surely everyone at the office will find out about their affair. Hey! Bob, are you okay? The situation has taken a dark turn, and Jane sounded anxious. Jane must have been planning to have Bob and me take care of life's chores for her, intending to lead a leisurely life as a NEET. Jane has a long history of being a housewife, and it's unlikely she can start working now. Bob is the only one to rely on, and it can't be helped, I guess. Bob, what are you gonna do? I haven't worked a day since graduating from high school, and there's no way I'm doing a part-time job now. Hannah seemed slightly troubled as well. Even when Jane and Hannah blame him, Bob remains silent, unable to say anything. I delivered a further blow to Bob. Bob, you probably haven't saved any money, have you? It said in the investigation report that you've been generously spending on your mistress. Even bought her the new designer handbag. Maybe you're in debt, too? I dropped a bomb. What? Whether Bob is shaken up, he can't find the words. Ignoring him, Jane is yelling at him. What? You don't buy them for me, but why did you get them for your mistress? Are you kidding me? Plus, debt? How much do you owe? I hate you, Bob. Even though I begged so much, you never bought me anything. Hannah also scolds Bob in a high-pitched voice. On the other side of the phone, Jane and Hannah are noisily complaining. Caroline, I really am sorry. So, please, handle these two somehow. Bob pleaded with me in an exhausted voice. But I have no intention of forgiving Bob. Why don't you deal with it yourself? I'm not involved, and it's what you deserve. Better tell your mistress soon. If you dilly-dally, a certified mail will reach your company, you know? I said to Bob with a smirk. Damn. Bob seemed frustrated. Ignoring such a Bob, I spoke. Well then, do your best. And please give me plenty of alimony. I hung up the phone right there. After hanging up, there were several calls from Bob, but I ignored them. Let Bob and Jane struggle as much as they want. I muttered quietly and set Bob's contact to block incoming calls. After that, my divorce with Bob was finalized. Initially, Bob resisted. Because there was dual income until now, Bob could afford to live even while he just messed around. With just Bob's income, maintaining the lifestyle we've had until now is certainly not feasible. It seems like Bob understands that, which is why he doesn't want to divorce me. However, I have decisive evidence of Bob's infidelity. Ultimately, I conveyed to him that I have absolutely no intention of reconciling, and that I will take legal action if he doesn't agree to the divorce any longer. With that, Bob, hanging his head down, said, "I'll agree to the divorce," and stamped the divorce papers. And so, I demanded alimony from Bob and settlement for emotional damage from his partner. The amount was determined while being informed about the going rate from my lawyer. So, I believe it's a fair amount. In fact, Bob's partner paid it promptly. Apparently, she borrowed it from her parents after explaining the situation. However, it was a steep amount for Bob. Can it be reduced? Even though he said that numerous times, I ultimately rejected Bob's request. During the meeting with our lawyers at the law office, "How about I add on the money you stole from my wallet?" As I cheerfully asked that, Bob turned pale as a ghost. "That amount is fine." In the end, Bob, trembling, agreed. After that, both Bob and his partner resigned from their company. The reason was that their affair was exposed within the company. It seems that the delivery of a certified document brought attention to the relationship between the two. Even if the contents of the envelope were unknown, an envelope from a divorce law office tends to be pretty self-explanatory. One can generally guess what's inside. Eventually, Bob resigned because things got uncomfortable. Being the subject of juicy gossip around the office, perhaps he couldn't stand it. After leaving the company, Bob has been working in day labor via an agency. Due to his age, it seems he couldn't find another job right away. But payments won't wait. He has living expenses, plus there's the installment payments of alimony to me. Plus, the mortgage still has a long way to go. Moreover, the debts he likely incurred during his affair came to light. Life's probably gonna be pretty tough, I bet. Sometimes I get messages from Bob, through the lawyer, to me. "I was wrong, please take me back. I'm begging you. I'm barely scraping by. If I'd known this would happen, I would have been nicer to Caroline," Bob says, reportedly weeping in front of the lawyer. I think he's really backed into a corner, but it's too late now. And the situation for Jane and Hannah doesn't look good either. Currently, they are living with Bob. But since Bob has no money, their living situation seems dire. One day, I got a message from Jane on my cell. I had blocked Bob's number, but I hadn't blocked Jane's. Seems like that backfired. Wondering what she could possibly want now, I answered the call. "Hello?" And the moment I answered, Jane begged me. "Please, help us. We're living with Bob, but he has no money and our electricity and gas are gonna be shut off. We don't even have anything left to eat." Jane spoke in an exhausted voice. I was surprised that their living situation had become so desperate. But I had no intention of helping. So, I brushed Jane off coldly. "Why don't you work? You're healthy, aren't you, Jane? You used to work back in the day, right?" Then, Hannah, presumably next to Jane, spoke up. "Caroline, isn't that harsh? You're working at a major company. You wrangled money out of Bob and his affair partner, so you must have some financial leeway, right? So, you have a duty to support Mom and me. If you tell us your address, we'll come there. Take care of us." Hannah apparently has no intention of working, even now. It's truly exasperating, considering she's still young. Biting back a sigh, I conveyed my stance. Now that I'm divorced from Bob, I'm a complete stranger to you, Hannah. I have no intention of supporting you, and I don't want anything more to do with you. Don't call me again. As soon as I finished speaking, Hannah shouted, "Don't mess with me, you old hag. You should just quietly take care of us. Tell us your address right now." After that, they kept shrieking for quite a while. Their characters will likely never change for the rest of their lives. I have nothing to do with this anymore. Goodbye. With that, I hung up the phone. I immediately blocked Jane's number. I never want to deal with them again. In their current state, they will likely face more hardship. But it's their own laziness that brought this upon them. I think it's fine if they continue to suffer. A year later, I decided to move out of the shared housing. It's a bit sad to leave where I made friends. The reason I'm leaving this fun and lively place is because I decided to adopt a dog. I met the dog at an adoption event. A dog-loving friend invited me, and I went along. That's where I had a destiny-filled encounter. While other dogs were being friendly with various people, this dog was different. It stared at me intently. The moment our eyes met, I thought, this dog might need me. After that, I attended the adoption events many times and deepened my bond with him. After several visits, joyfully, I was allowed to adopt him. However, the shared housing don't allow pets. So, sadly, I had to move out. Now I live in a pet-friendly apartment. Dogs don't betray you, and it's so cute. Come here. When I call, he runs towards me joyfully. There will probably be various difficulties in the future. But I'm not alone anymore. I want to move forward, facing forward, supporting each other with this beloved dog. Hey! You awake? If so, get out of the hospital quick, you useless wife. An unfamiliar man suddenly yelled at me, just as I was waking up. Excuse me, who are you? Are you sure you've got the right person? Upon hearing my words, the man seemed taken aback for a moment, but then quickly smirked. Huh? Who the heck is this guy? Gives me the creeps. If you don't remember, that's fine. Just hurry up and get back home, useless wife. With a nasty remark and an unsettling grin, the man left the room. What on earth happened to me? Today, I want you to hear about the worst day of my life from 2 years ago. My name is Hazel Thompson. A divorced 32-year-old. 2 years prior, at the age of 30, I woke up in a hospital bed. Waking up, I was surrounded by an eerie feeling. Because I couldn't understand why I was in such a place. Why was I lying in a hospital bed? What on earth happened to me? No matter how hard I tried to recall, I couldn't remember anything before falling asleep. When I tried to sit up, a sharp pain shot through my head. Ouch! I touched my head and felt a bandage. Did I hurt my head? But why? Since waking up, my mind was filled with questions. While I was still confused, a man approached me. Hey! You awake? If so, get out of here quick, you useless wife. He glared at me and suddenly shouted. Excuse me, who are you? You sure you've got the right person? I didn't recognize the man and hesitantly spoke to him. My words made the man's eyes widen in surprise. He looked really mad, maybe he confused me with someone else. I gave the man a friendly smile, hoping he'd realize his mistake and move on. That's what I thought. But instead of leaving, he looked at me with a puzzled expression and started asking like, do you not remember? Don't you know why you're here? I nodded honestly, and he smirked eerily and was like, if you don't remember, I guess that's fine. If that's the case, no worries. Just hurry back home, you useless wife. Then he kicked my bed and stormed out of the room. Huh? Who was that guy? Creepy, right? He definitely mistook me for someone else. But boy, he sure acted like he owned the place. If he's someone's husband, that's just terrible. Lost in these thoughts, my mother entered the room, as if swapping places with the man. Hazel! You're awake! Thank goodness! Tears filled her eyes as she rushed to me. Mom, I'm sorry for worrying you. I'm okay. But just before you came in, some weird guy was here and he yelled at me. I think he confused me with someone else. Is everything all right? As I said this, my mother tilted her head and was like, huh? The guy who just left was Kyle, wasn't he? Did someone come in before Kyle? Kyle? Who's that? Who? Your husband. No way, Mom. Stop joking. What are you talking about? Just wait a second. Hazel, are you serious? Didn't you get married last year? You came to tell me how happy you were to get married before turning 30. Don't you remember? Mom, what are you talking about? I'm only 28. What do you mean before turning 30? Upon hearing this, my mother rushed out of the room in panic. Soon, doctors and nurses came rushing in, and I underwent various tests. I was later diagnosed with amnesia due to a severe head injury. It turned out I hadn't lost all my memories but had forgotten about the last 2 years since I met my husband, Kyle. It seems I've lost my memories from the age of 28 to 30. Which meant the man who had yelled at me earlier, Kyle, was indeed my husband. Kyle had yelled at me without showing any concern after I woke up. I wondered why I had married such a man. The next day, in the afternoon, the same man, supposedly my husband Kyle, visited the room. This time, he was accompanied by an older woman. Is this woman also someone I know? While I pondered that, she was like, look at that, you're already up. How long were you planning on lounging around? Just like Kyle, instead of showing concern, she snapped at me. Excuse me, but who are you? Upon hearing my question, she looked surprised but retorted like, wow, just like Kyle said, you really don't know me? I'm so sorry, I don't recognize you or the man from earlier either. Just like Kyle did yesterday, she smirked and was like, well, that's convenient. Kyle, you played your cards right. What did she mean by played your cards right? When I looked puzzled, Kyle explained like, you're my wife, and this is my mother. Got it? Apparently, this woman was his mother. In other words, my mother-in-law. By the way, it's just a little injury, right? How long are you planning on staying in the hospital? Who's gonna cook our meals? And there's a pile of laundry. Hurry up and come home. Then, joining in, my mother-in-law exclaimed like, that's right. Do you know how much this hospital stay is gonna cost? And what about work? You've been missing out, but the pay's still coming in, right? Kyle and my mother-in-law kept nagging and blaming me. But when my mother came to visit, their attitude changed drastically. Hazel, how are you feeling? Oh, you guys are here too. It seems Hazel has lost her memory from the time she met Kyle. Addressing the in-laws, my mother's voice trailed off. My mother-in-law was quickly like, she hit her head, right? At least she looks okay. That's a relief. My mother-in-law hurriedly added like, well, we'll be off then. They hurriedly left. I asked my mother like, did I really marry that man? Yes. Kyle has always taken great care of you, and your mother-in-law was kind too. After getting married, you moved to the Thompsons' family home. Then, until yesterday, we didn't hear anything from you. Out of the blue, we were told you had an accident. What's been going on? Why didn't you contact us? No, Mom, that's what I'm saying. I don't remember anything. What happened? I replied with a laugh, but I couldn't shake off the unease. The Kyle and mother-in-law I met after losing my memory were nothing like the caring and kind people my mother described. Their attitude had completely changed once my mother arrived. They seemed more concerned about house chores and money than me. Wait. Money? That reminds me, what's happening with my job? Mom, speaking of which, I'm still continuing my work as a tax consultant, right? You're still working there. Mr. Johnson was concerned and said you should take it easy for now. After graduating from college, I acquired my CPA license. I got a job at Johnson's CPA firm. That's a relief. I'm still continuing with my job. But wait. Right now, it should be the middle of a weekday. My mother is a stay-at-home mother, and I've been given time off from the CPA office to recover. But what about those two? They came to the hospital, but aren't they working? The more I thought about Kyle and my mother-in-law, the more suspicious I became. And it wasn't just me. My mother, seeing my behavior, started to become suspicious of Kyle and his mother as well. Then the next day, I still couldn't recall my memories. Kyle and his mom visited the hospital again in the afternoon.
Hey, Hazel. Enough is enough. At first, I thought it was okay if you lost your memories, but how long are you gonna stay here? I've been telling you to come home and take care of me.
Before the accident, how did I handle such harsh words from Kyle? But thinking about it, there's nothing I can do since I can't remember.
No matter what you say, I don't remember you. I don't want to live with someone I don't know. Besides, I'm still receiving treatment. Why don't you take care of yourself? You're an adult, right?
I boldly said that to Kyle. He then grabbed me by the collar, his face turning bright red, and was like, "You trying to defy me? I did you a favor by marrying a slowpoke like you. No one will want you if I leave you." His mother, my mother-in-law, chided Kyle like, "Didn't we agree you wouldn't raise your hand outside?" While saying that, she was like, "Kyle's right. We're putting up with a klutz like you. All you need to do is earn money and take care of us." Suddenly acting defiant and being cocky. Being hospitalized and wasting money. Whether it was from being grabbed by the collar or from their confrontation, a dull pain like I was hit with a blunt object ran through my head. Then, I remembered everything. It felt like a fog lifting from my mind, and everything became clear. From meeting Kyle to our married life, and why I had the accident. I remembered everything. But I couldn't let those two know that I regained my memory. Pretending to still have amnesia, I was like, "Stop it. I might not remember how I was before, but I'll call the police, okay?" Upon hearing this, Kyle let go of me, and my mother-in-law angrily remarked like, "You ungrateful wife. Don't get carried away." But again, their attitude changed dramatically as soon as my mother appeared.
"Oh, hey. You've been visiting every day, haven't you?"
With a forced smile, my mother-in-law addressed my mother. Today, a counselor also joined my mother. Apparently, there was going to be a discussion with Kyle, my mother-in-law, and my mother to help retrieve my memories. Though my memory had already returned, this seemed like the perfect opportunity. Without letting the counselor know I had remembered, we began the session. Kyle and my mother-in-law insisted there was no pressing need for me to force my memories back. And just like that, their attitude changed completely from just moments ago. Kyle spoke with a bright smile, detailing how harmoniously we had lived as a married couple up until now. My mother-in-law enthusiastically recounted how we lived like a real mother and daughter. Where did these two learn to act so convincingly? Their tales seemed so fabricated, it was clear they were enjoying spinning their web of lies. Hearing their stories, I couldn't help but frown. My mother, sensing something amiss, made eye contact with me. I felt sorry for the counselor, but when I asked if I could pose a question, she encouraged me to ask whatever I was curious about. I then asked Kyle and my mother-in-law like, "Have I always been a terrible wife?" The counselor exclaimed in shock like, "A terrible wife?" She exclaimed in surprise. My mother-in-law quickly retorted like, "Hazel, what are you talking about? What's gotten into you all of a sudden?"
Huh? Didn't you guys keep calling me a useless wife and klutz just yesterday and today? Oh my, we never said that. Are you sure you didn't mishear? But you've been telling me to hurry home and do the chores, calling me a useless wife, and saying things like you're putting up with someone as useless as me, right? Am I being bullied by you?
Upon saying this, my mother-in-law, drenched in sweat, interjected like, "Hazel, stop it. That's not true." My husband was like, "That's right, Hazel and Mom always got along really well. The two of them were visibly flustered. Far more than you'd expect if they really had a close relationship. I remember everything now. From our marriage up until the accident, they always burdened me with all the household chores. On top of that, my mother-in-law used to take most of my salary, claiming it was for living expenses. Facing Kyle, I inquired by the way, Kyle, what do you do for a living?
Huh?
He hesitated to respond.
I've been working at the accounting firm and doing all the housework, right? That means you must be so busy you can't do housework. Yet you come to the hospital every day at noon. What exactly are you doing? I took some time off from work because I was worried about you. Really? So, what's your job? That's none of your business right now.
Kyle was becoming increasingly agitated.
Shouldn't we be discussing everything openly during counseling?
I looked to the counselor for support, and she gave Kyle a curious glance. Kyle, turning a deep shade of red, declared I'm currently out of work. What's wrong with that? He shouted back defiantly.
So, you're unemployed then? Does that mean your mother works?
When I asked that, my mother-in-law stammered like me. I am. Now, my mother-in-law began to get flustered.
So, you're unemployed too? What? In our time, it was common for women to stay at home and look after the house. Your mother did the same thing. What's wrong with that?
I could see their true colors as their temper flared.
No one's saying being unemployed is a bad thing. But if that's the case, why was I doing all the housework even though I was working? Especially when both of you and Kyle had the time to share the chores. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Getting increasingly frustrated, my mother-in-law snapped what are you trying to say? It's a given for a wife to do house chores.
But you two were living off the money I earned, right? Isn't that a bit much? You. Don't get too big for your boots. It's only natural for you to earn money for Kyle's sake. Just be grateful you have someone like him.
Finally, my mother-in-law, forgetting that my mother and the counselor were present, began to yell at me.
What's going on? I'm clearly being tormented here. Why did I marry someone like this? Someone who won't even stand up for me when I'm being bullied by his mother? I married the worst kind of guy.
When I said that, Kyle retorted like you. Calling me the worst? Don't mess with me. You're lucky to be married to a catch like me. It's only natural you'd serve me. I can't stand this charade anymore. This hospital bill is such a waste of money. I don't have money to waste on you. Just come back home. Kyle shouted this, and my mother-in-law chimed in exactly. You've been hospitalized for days. How much is that gonna cost? We were just thinking of letting you stay at home during the summer because you said you'd obey and follow me. Kyle laughed along and added too bad, because you opposed Mom, your bedroom turned back into the barn. The counselor, who had been silently listening, exclaimed you had her sleep in a barn during this scorching summer? Caught off guard, the two stammered well, she was being rebellious. They desperately began to make excuses, but it was already too late. Then, my mother was what do you mean by making my daughter sleep in the barn? She confronted my mother-in-law and Kyle with those words. Turning to the counselor, my mother inquired you've been recording all of this conversation, right? The counselor had mentioned at the beginning that the sessions would be recorded for future reference. The counselor affirmed of course. Upon hearing this, Kyle and my mother-in-law began trembling and mumbled we're sorry. In a pitiable tone. But this was just the beginning. Shall we go for the finishing blow? I announced everyone I remember everything. Kyle and my mother-in-law jumped up, exclaiming we're so sorry. We repent. Please spare us any more of this. They were begging for forgiveness. But why should I forgive? I explained to everyone why I ended up being hospitalized. Back then, I was utterly brainwashed by the two of them. Even though I was initially tormented after our marriage, they'd be kind to me afterwards. I was relied on. Gradually, I began to feel that these two couldn't manage without me. With such a mindset, it's strange how I started to follow their every command. I was told not to contact my real parents, and I obeyed that without a second thought. More importantly, even when I was mistreated, I never felt that the treatment was unjust. Then came the day of the accident. Kyle would always come to my workplace, partly to keep an eye on me. But that day, by chance, he saw me greet my boss, Mr. Johnson. On the way home, inside the car, he yelled me like, "Were you always flirting with other men besides me, like you did just now?" In a fit of rage, he pulled the car over, tried to drag me out of it. Even though I resisted desperately, Kyle pushed me so hard that I hit my head against the guardrail and fell onto the road. Ignoring me lying there, he drove away. Luckily, a passerby called an ambulance, and I was safely taken to the hospital. The reason for Kyle's smug smile when he realized I had lost my memory was his relief that it wouldn't be revealed that he was responsible for the accident. They probably came to the hospital not to visit me but to make sure I hadn't regained my memory. It happened on a major street. There are plenty of security cameras. If they check, they'll surely find footage of Kyle pushing me. If I report this to the police, Kyle will likely face charges. Frantically, Kyle pleaded like I didn't mean any harm. I was just jealous. "I'll treat you right from now on, Hazel. Please forgive me. You wouldn't want me to get arrested, right?" Unfortunately for him. After the accident and the temporary memory loss, the brainwashing had been completely undone. I calmly told Kyle like sadly, "I no longer have any feelings for you. In fact, I genuinely hope you get arrested. Reflect on your actions while serving your time. Also, let's get divorced. And yes, I'll be asking for compensation." Kyle crumpled to the ground, murmuring like no way. He was sobbing so intensely it was hard to believe a grown man could cry that much. My mother-in-law, even at this point, yelled like, "Who do you think allowed you to live in our house all this time, you ungrateful woman?" But in reality, it was me who had been feeding them with my salary.
You've been living off my paycheck all this time, haven't you? I cooked, did laundry, cleaned everything. I won't be fooled anymore. Maybe, before you scold me, you should think about how you're gonna survive from now on.
With that, it seemed reality finally hit my mother-in-law. She stammered. Words escaped her as she broke down. Soon after, the police arrived due to my call and took Kyle away. During the investigation, he apparently admitted to his crime without any resistance. A few weeks after my discharge from the hospital, I immediately visited a law firm. I successfully divorced Kyle and managed to get a lump sum as compensation for the harm. I was advised to change both my workplace and residence for safety, so I got a new job at an accounting firm run by a colleague of Mr. Johnson. My mother and I moved near this new workplace. I never dreamed I'd be caught up with such a weird man and be brainwashed, but it's an experience nonetheless. I vowed to be strong and not let anyone manipulate me like that again, to truly live my life for myself.
Didn't I tell you I was going golfing with my boss today? Geez, don't call me for stuff like that.
When I frantically called my husband, the response I got was cold and distant. I had just received news that our daughter had been involved in a car accident. She was reportedly taken to the hospital, and despite the urgency, when I called my husband, who was out, he showed no signs of concern. I exclaimed like, "What are you talking about? She's your daughter too." But his demeanor remained unchanged.
I don't care. Golfing with my boss is more important than she is.
My name is Catherine. I'm a 42-year-old homemaker, living with my husband and daughter. My husband, Bob, who is 3 years older than me, works for a major company in downtown. We met at a party thrown by a mutual friend after I started my career. Back then, I found Bob, who was dedicated to his job as a businessperson, very attractive. When Bob asked me out, I was over the moon, and the day he proposed felt like I was on cloud 9. After getting married, I quit my job to focus on household chores and enjoyed a happy newlywed life. A year later, we were blessed with a daughter named Emily. Raising her wasn't easy, but my mother-in-law, who lost her husband and lived alone, was always there to help, which was a blessing. Now, Emily is in her sophomore year of high school. She studies hard, is active in school activities, and enjoys her life as a teenage girl, hanging out with friends and such. However, this year, there was a noticeable change in our previously harmonious family life. It started about 6 months ago. Right after a long weekend. Bob had planned a trip with his colleagues, so Emily and I spent the holiday just the two of us. On the last day of the holidays, Bob returned, so we were having dinner together as a family for the first time in a few days. At that time, Emily talked to Bob about her plans for after high school. While Bob was away, Emily had consulted with me about her future. She had already decided to go to college, and I had given her my blessing, so all that was left was to get Bob's opinion.
Hey, Dad. I've been thinking. I want to go to college after high school,
Emily said, nervously approaching the topic. I knew that Bob had been saving money for Emily's future, so I never doubted that he would support her decision. However, contrary to my expectations, Bob grimaced and replied dismissively.
Why should I care? Do whatever you want.
I was taken aback by his cold response and unintentionally let out a gasp. Bob immediately put down his fork, left the table without clearing his plate. As if he was in a bad mood, he stomped off to his room. Left behind, Emily and I were taken aback by Bob's unusually distant behavior. I wonder what got into Dad. Did I say something wrong?
He's probably just tired from the trip. We'll discuss your plans another time.
I tried to console her. Although Emily seemed uneasy, she accepted my explanation. However, the next day, Bob's cold attitude persisted. From that point on, Bob began to blatantly ignore Emily. He wouldn't talk to her at all and always acted indifferent. Moreover, he started going out more on weekends, and the time we spent together as a family decreased significantly. Given the atmosphere, discussing Emily's future became impossible. Feeling consistently ignored without understanding why, Emily began to resent her father. Even my attempts to mediate didn't help, and their relationship worsened. Concerned about the situation, I consulted with my mother-in-law, who had a good relationship with Bob. She even tried to scold him. However, that only made Bob angrier, leading him to snap, and he was like, "Mind your own business." To make matters worse, he even blamed me for discussing the issue with my mother-in-law. On the night my mother-in-law came over, after Emily locked herself in her room, Bob yelled at me.
Why did you talk to my mom? Don't meddle. It's because you've been cold to Emily, isn't it? Why are you ignoring her now? You used to dote on her so much.
When I finally mustered the courage to ask why, Bob just glared at me with annoyance and didn't answer. No matter how hard I tried to mediate between the two of them, Bob's attitude didn't change at all. Time went by without knowing the reason for his change. But considering his sudden change in behavior after he returned from the long weekend trip, it's reasonable to think something happened during the trip. Maybe someone filled his head with nonsense. It might be all in my head, but I can't figure it out on my own. So, I decided to talk to my mother-in-law and investigate the reason for Bob's change. Then, one day. It was Sunday, but both Bob and Emily were out since the morning. As I was doing my usual housework at home, I received a call on the landline just before noon. It was an unknown number displayed on my phone. I picked up with suspicion, and to my surprise, the caller claimed to be from the police.
Are you related to Emily? Yes, I'm her mother. Oh my God, did something happen to her?
With a sinking feeling, I asked the officer back, and the words I heard next were completely unexpected. The officer was like, "Actually, the bus Emily was on got into a traffic accident." I couldn't respond right away. I felt faint, and my hands holding the phone started shaking. Emily had told me she was going to the mall with friends, and apparently, she was on the bus at the time. According to the officer, a car from the opposite lane crashed into the bus, and Emily and her friend were taken to a city hospital. After hearing the details of the accident and hanging up, I was in shock and couldn't move for a while. But I knew I had to tell Bob quickly, so I rushed to call him on my cell. After more than 20 seconds of ringing, Bob answered. He grumbled like, "What is it?" Ignoring his tone, I frantically conveyed what happened to Emily.
Bob, this is serious. I just got a call from the police. The bus Emily was on got into an accident. She's apparently been taken to the hospital.
As I explained, tears streamed down my face. But ignoring my panic, Bob coldly responded like so. What do you want me to do about it? Seeing no signs of him being disturbed, and feeling as if he couldn't care less, I got even more frustrated.
What are you saying? Please head to the hospital now. I'm going too.
Before I could tell him the name of the hospital, Bob cut me off.
Huh? Didn't I tell you I have a golf outing with my boss today? I'm staying overnight and coming back tomorrow morning. Can't help it.
True, he had told me a few days ago about a golf outing with his boss today. However, I was shocked by Bob's lack of concern about our daughter's accident.
How can you even say that? Emily is your daughter.
Bob was like, I don't care. Golf with my boss is more important than her. You go to the hospital on your own. He spat out before hanging up abruptly. I tried calling back immediately, but it seemed he turned off his phone. I sent a text, but given his attitude, I doubted he would reply. Even though they had been distant, Emily is his flesh and blood. How could he be so heartless? This incident completely shattered my trust in Bob, and I was certain I couldn't continue living with him. I decided on divorce, but heading to the hospital was my top priority, so I hurriedly left home. As he had declared, Bob didn't come home that day. He had said it was too far from the golf course, so he planned to stay at a hotel alone after golf. He even took the next day off work. When Bob came home the next morning, he was surprisingly cheerful, which was hard to believe for a father whose daughter had an accident the previous day.
Hey, what happened to Emily? Is she hospitalized?
Though Bob asked about Emily's condition, his casual tone made it clear he wasn't genuinely concerned. I was in the living room. Then I looked up to the sky and replied. She's there. Seeing my downcast expression, for some reason, Bob looked pleased.
I see. Well, that's a relief. Once Emily's funeral is over, we can get divorced right away.
Saying that, he pulled out a piece of paper from his bag and thrust it in front of me. It was an invoice from a lawyer who assists divorce procedure. By the way, it also served as a contract for lawyer consultation, and it already had his signature on it. I thought he was quite prepared, but since I had already decided to divorce Bob, it might have saved me some hassle.
All right, I got it.
I quietly agreed to the divorce. Bob didn't even discuss the reason for the divorce, he just walked away to his room without saying anything else, as if he was done with me. The Bob who once cherished Emily and valued our family was gone. It was a harsh realization. But I didn't feel sad, only an increasing resentment towards him. Then, I called my mother-in-law and told her Bob was back, and contacted the lawyer. Within an hour, my mother-in-law arrived at our house, and Bob returned to the living room. As soon as my mother-in-law saw Bob, she approached him with tears in her eyes.
Bob, what were you doing when your family needed you the most? I never thought you'd be this cold-hearted.
Even when scolded by his mother, Bob didn't show any remorse. Instead, he was like, I had prior commitments, what can I do? And it was all her making a big fuss, looking at me with a mocking attitude. He continued like, I've been dying to get divorced. With Emily gone, I feel so relieved. Now, I can leave without any regrets, speaking ill of not only me but also Emily. I couldn't stand it any longer.
Enough is enough,
I shouted, thrusting a few pictures at Bob. The pictures showed a man and a woman closely together, looking intimate. The moment he saw the pictures, Bob's face turned pale. The man in the pictures was unmistakably Bob.
Where did you get these pictures?
Stammering, I told him calmly.
They were taken yesterday afternoon. Weren't you supposed to be at a business golf outing? Instead, you were with a young woman. What were you up to?
Confronted, Bob averted his eyes with a frustrated look. These pictures were taken less than an hour after I called about the Emily situation. Bob began to make excuses like she's just a colleague from work. We just went golfing together. I sighed in disbelief.
Golfing in such fancy clothes? I don't think so. I already know you're cheating, so save your breath.
The word cheating made Bob's face stiffen. His inability to deny it immediately was telling. But this wasn't the first time I learned of Bob's affair. Recently, he often left the house without telling where he was going. So, after discussing with my mother-in-law and getting some financial help, I had hired a private investigator. The investigation revealed that whenever he went out, he met the woman in the photos, exposing his affair. His so-called business golf was a complete lie, and he probably stayed at a hotel with his lover.
I have more evidence of your affair. I even have a video of you and that woman coming out of a hotel. Don't think you can get out of it.
When I said that, Bob looked pleadingly at his mother. But she already knew of his infidelity and firmly shook her head in disapproval.
To cheat and not even visit Emily in the hospital, and then to selfishly rejoice thinking she's dead. I don't know how you'll face your father.
My mother-in-law said this with a mix of anger and sorrow. Bob froze in shock, his mouth agape.
Wait, isn't Emily dead?
I explained to a bewildered Bob like don't jinx it. You misunderstood. She's very much alive. The injuries from the accident were just minor scratches. Emily was taken to the hospital yesterday, but she was fine and had no major injuries. The accident wasn't severe, so she came home the same day. Bob misunderstood my comment looking up to the sky she's there, and assumed Emily had passed away.
Emily is on her school trip as planned. She'll be landing soon. A school trip?
Bob was taken aback, his eyes wide. Bob, who didn't care about his daughter, had completely forgotten about Emily's school trip. The trip started today and was for 3 nights and 4 days. Emily had gone shopping for it yesterday. The doctor had said that there wouldn't be any issues with Emily going on the school trip, so she left as scheduled this morning. When I told Bob that Emily was up in the sky, she was probably boarding the plane. I used those words to indirectly blame him for not worrying about our daughter.
Oh, that's what happened? Well, I'm glad Emily is okay. I hope she enjoys her trip. How can you say that now? You knew how much she'd been looking forward to this trip since sophomore year. But I guess you'd be just as happy if she had an accident. You probably forgot all about it.
I sternly rebuked Bob, who tried to feign laughter. I didn't have a shred of affection left for him. No matter what he says in the future, I'm never gonna trust Bob again. Just then, an email notification popped up on Bob's smartphone. After reading the message, Bob's body began to tremble with anger. Shoving the screen in my face, he shouted like, "Hey! What the hell is this?" I looked at the screen with my mother-in-law. It was from Emily with a concise message.
I can't consider someone who prioritizes his affair over his family as my father. I'm cutting ties with you.
It was as if she was sending a message to a stranger. It seemed that Emily learned yesterday about Bob's lie about playing golf when he was actually meeting his mistress. She probably sent the email after landing. Being bluntly disowned by his 17-year-old daughter, Bob's face, which was pale just moments ago, turned a deep shade of red from shame and anger. He glared at me and began yelling. He was like, "This is all your fault. Weren't you the one who cheated first?" I was completely lost.
What are you talking about? When did I ever cheat? Don't play dumb. Jessica told me.
Jessica? Who's that? Then I remembered that the detective agency found out that the name of Bob's mistress was Jessica. According to Bob, Jessica had filled his head with baseless lies about me when they first started their affair. She told him that I had cheated on him and that Emily was fathered by someone else. The detective agency confirmed that he began his affair 6 months ago, right when the relationship between Bob and Emily started to sour. Since Jessica works at the same company as Bob, they likely started their affair during the long weekend. Jessica had been spreading outrageous lies, saying I had cheated in the past and had Bob raise Emily, a child fathered by another man.
But Emily doesn't look or act anything like me. It's natural for me to have doubts.
Both my mother-in-law and I were rendered speechless at Bob's outburst. Thinking Emily wasn't his because of Jessica's lie, he began to resent her and treated her coldly. But he didn't want to divorce because he didn't want to pay child support. However, mistaking Emily's accident for her death yesterday, he was relieved thinking he could divorce without any complications.
You've got to be kidding me. So you believed a lie your mistress cooked up over your own family?
No matter how angrily I shouted, Bob just responded with a dismissive laugh.
I don't care whether it's true or not. I'm gonna divorce you and be with Jessica.
Before I could retort, my mother-in-law stepped in. With a stoic face, she sighed deeply as she locked eyes with Bob. I realized she was livid.
I wonder where I went wrong raising you. I'm so ashamed. Did you forget that Emily looked just like you when she was a baby? She's definitely your child. I told you I don't care about that anymore.
No matter how much she scolded, Bob remained defiant. Right then, someone knocked at the front door. I went to answer and brought the guest to the living room. Bob looked puzzled. The visitor was a man in a suit, around our age. Bob rudely asked, like, who the hell are you? Are you her lover or something? Unfazed, the man handed Bob his business card with a smile. Bob accepted the business card with disbelief, but the next moment his eyes widened in surprise as he read.
A lawyer?
Yes, he was the lawyer I had hired with the help of my mother-in-law. I had consulted him about Bob around the same time I had the detective agency investigate. I had asked him to come over yesterday, anticipating that Bob would do something rash given the situation with Emily. I suspected it had to do with Emily, and I had a feeling Bob might have done something unthinkable. I told Bob, like, call your mistress over right now. Bob started panicking and was like, why would Jessica be involved? At this point, the lawyer chimed in like, it's quite unreasonable to say she's not involved. Call her now. Bob had no comeback to that. Realizing he had no way out, Bob begrudgingly contacted his mistress. About 30 minutes later, a young woman arrived at the house. Jessica looked like she was in her 20s and probably took a personal day off from work, just like Bob. She approached us with a disgruntled look.
What's this all about? I've got nothing to do with your family issues.
Despite Jessica's refusal, I told her that I was divorcing Bob and that even if she stayed with Bob, he'd have to pay child support to Emily, who was about to go to college.
What? I have nothing to do with this.
She insisted she had no involvement, but the lawyer promptly responded.
We have plenty of evidence of the affair. Plus, you fed Bob some nasty lies which resulted in irreparable damage to Catherine and her family. That's defamation, and we could sue you for it.
By the time the lawyer finished explaining, both Bob and Jessica had turned pale. Realizing they were out of options and not wanting a court battle, Bob agreed to pay child support properly. We went through a divorce. Later on, I heard that Bob's company found out he had been using his boss as a cover for his affairs. The whole company was appalled by the way he handled the situation, especially when they found out he pretended to be happy about his daughter's fake death. Exposing his true nature led him to resign from his position. Trying to find a new job proved difficult as word of Bob's misconduct had spread within the industry. Although he managed to find part-time jobs, his pride got in the way, and he constantly had issues with colleagues, which led him to quit frequently. The savings set aside for Emily's future had already been spent on his affair with Jessica. Soon after our divorce, the two broke up, and Jessica apparently quit her job too. But now, that's none of my concern. Struggling, Bob turned to his mother for help, but was denied. He even tried to cozy up to me and Emily. He was like, please, I was wrong. Let's start over, the three of us. Of course, we rejected him. We blocked his contacts and moved to a new place with the help of his mother. Now, his mother lives near us, and we continue to maintain a close relationship. I have no idea what became of Bob, and I never want to be involved with him again. Freed from the stress of the troubled relationship with his father, Emily has been thriving in high school. Now, as a senior, she got accepted into her first-choice college.
Congratulations, Emily! You did an amazing job. Thanks, Mom. It's all because you and Grandma supported me.
Emily responded, tears streaming down his face. Since the college is commutable from our home, we plan to live together as we always have. I managed to find a job shortly after becoming a single parent and now work full-time. We have enough savings to cover Emily's tuition. I'm hoping for a bright future as we move forward, living happily with our